You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Moser. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Headlines of the news today, Wednesday the 21st of March. Kurdish Communist Workers to hold Red Festival in London Park. 2 men sentenced for standing on a man's head in London. Turks ready to reinvest in Greece. Far right not behind Jewish shootings in Toulouse. Man linked to Al-Qaeda on trial in Germany. Heavy fighting against Al-Qaeda forces in Somalia. Thought for the day, Laura Wilson, A Fine Romance. UK News. Police have warned that a festival in Finsbury Park could attract terrorists from the far left. The Kurdish Communist Workers Party, known as PKK, flew the Red Star banner at last year's event. Kurds who organised the event say it would be unwise to ask us to stop people using the PKK flag because even your police won't do it. 5,000 people are expected to attend. One spokesperson commented, "Can you imagine what Finsbury Park was like 70 years ago compared to what is being allowed now?" 2 men have been sentenced in London for attacking a man by kicking him unconscious, then dragging him through a supermarket and beating him savagely. They then both stood on his head and broke his jaw, after which they then sped off in their high-powered BMW. The incident took place last September when the 2 men, named as Yufuk Yapici and Michael Wabara, attacked the man after he refused to allow the girl he was with to get into the car with them. Both men have been sentenced to 7 years in prison. No mention of deportation then. Euronews. Greece for the first time could see some form of help from its disliked neighbour Turkey. The Turks have been interested in port investments, and considering that over 30% of Greek land is up for sale, the Turks may have their eyes set on that too. Unfortunately, Greece is in such a state that this would never have been allowed in the past, due to the tensions over the occupation of northern Cyprus by the Turks, which angered Greece and the Christian world. Greece has just raised €1.3 billion in treasury bond auctions, but the country could find itself under financial domination by the Turks in the future. The far right wing is not behind the gunning down of Jewish victims in Toulouse. French police surrounded the house of the jihadist and arrested the suspect named as Mohamed Merah. He was arrested along with his entire family after a siege in France. Claude Goin, the Interior Minister, says Merah had been followed for several years by the DCRI intelligence services. He had also escaped from a prison in Kandahar orchestrated by the Taliban. He had been sentenced to 3 years there for planting bombs in Kandahar. Sarkozy trilled that he had brought together the Jewish and Muslim communities of France. Oh yeah? Not just tried to sideline Marine Le Pen's presidential campaign by blaming the far right then? Poor little man. That little ruse failed, didn't it? Apparently the alleged killer sought revenge for the deaths of Palestinian children, but has been roundly condemned by the Palestinian Prime Minister. Merah was also traced by police through an email to one of his victims, and the gunman also threatened to post shooting footage online. Classy. The 4 Jewish victims were buried in Israel today. 2 French paratroopers were also killed. An Afghan man is on trial in Germany suspected of being part of the Al-Qaeda network. Ahmed Wali Siddiqui had bought laptops, iPhones and other high-tech equipment on credit in Germany and then sold them on the internet to fund the trip with himself and a friend to fight the Jihad, holy war, against the West. He is still on trial in Germany after being captured by the Americans after a massive anti-terrorist hunt. World News. The Pentagon has predicted that Israel will drag the United States into war with Iran. In a statement that everyone on the planet already knows, the Pentagon has said that if Israel strikes the nuclear facilities in Iran, the Iranians will target one of the US naval ships in the Gulf. Turkey has been placed on the front line in the attempt to oust the president of Syria. The Turkish government has said there are lines it will not cross with the Syrian government over ousting President Bashar al-Assad. Government forces have seen heavy fighting in Somalia this week. The fighting, which has been going on against Al-Qaeda-based groups in Somalia, has seen heavy casualties. The Islamic terrorist forces have been moving up a gear in attacks on government targets and using various terrorist tactics against the Somali government. Thought for the day, Laura Wilson, A Fine Romance? Laura Wilson was just 17 years old, a happy but headstrong girl whose love story across the racial divide would have a tragic ending. What a stupid and ill-informed heading. Does this tragic story have another basis? That of Muslim grooming in the UK? The media and indeed the communities around this very sad story are very eager to put this murder into the category of honour killings amongst South Asian women. And indeed members of other non-Muslim communities are holding up their hands, admitting in general that many women, for example Sikh and Hindu, are refusing to accept arranged marriages and therefore leave themselves wide open to honour killings within their families. This was not the case with young Laura Wilson. Apart from the fact she was white and did not have an arranged marriage with the family of her murderer, the circumstances are frighteningly similar to cases of Muslim grooming that I've been reporting on. First, this should be taken up with the media, because they are throwing a smokescreen over the entire tragedy, giving the public false leads and drawing in the entire South Asian communities on a crime which I believe is entirely down to grooming practices which have been prevalent for years in the Muslim communities settled in the Midlands and northern parts of the UK. In fact, Nick Griffin has been warning of the effect of this practice on our younger generation for many years. The police and the media are struggling to take all eyes away from the true fact of this crime, insofar as we must not do anything that displeases the Muslim community in general. Facts. Laura's first love, in her own mother's words, was a Muslim youth her own age, which owing to her own youth must have been around 14 or 15 at the time. Clearly she was approached by groomers. They only ever approach young, sometimes underage girls, because not only are they more gullible, but they have not been around for the rest of the male population to use. Ashgar was, I believe, the prime groomer, who was also known as her boyfriend, the usual term for the groomer concerned. Skip and ignore wonderful Romeo and Juliet stories of cross-racial divides crap. This is a business, usually a family business, to make money and a business of sexual availability. Now somewhere in this love story an older Muslim guy appears, Ishaq Hussain, aged 20. Now this is where it gets really murky and the media skip over the obvious. In this wonderful cross-racial relationship, Ishaq gets Laura pregnant and she produces a child. This mistake does sometimes happen within the grooming process and usually is when the youngster realises that she is not going to marry the father. In some cases the young girl being groomed has had her stomach stamped on to avoid the reality of a child. Being pregnant also takes the girl out of the ring for some time. My point being, if she was so in love with her groomer, how come Laura got pregnant by another man? I believe it was because she was being handed round to older Muslim men. It would be done expressly without her parents' or mother's knowledge, as they are told if they speak about it would be dangerous for the girl's family. So the poor mother was quite right in her expression that Ashgar was her first love. He was. And he was also probably her last. I would imagine that Laura was put on the round robin again after her delivery, and this is where her first love came in again, to make sure she did as she was told. It seems in a short space of time, as the media puts it, Laura challenged his family's traditional cultural values by confronting them with details of their relationship and had to be silenced. Bull, and so much bull. Poor little Laura was probably tired of being handed round to other Muslim men and wanted to settle down with her first groomer or boyfriend. I do not believe even in the land of dreams this would ever have happened. Firstly, she was white. Even more importantly, she was non-Muslim, and then she also had an illegitimate child from another Muslim. It would never ever have happened. The groomers never ever marry their produce or business. Going round to Ashgar's family was her death note. Well-known horror stories are told within the areas that tolerate this grooming of white and non-Muslim families being threatened and blackmailed into silence amongst fears of harm to other family members by the Muslim families of the males concerned. She must have been desperate to escape and had nowhere to turn, let alone the police. The families of her so-called boyfriend Ashgar and Hussain, the father of her child, must have been the only avenues left, and what a tragic avenue that turned out to be. One night in October 2010, Laura was lured to the banks of a canal in Rotherham in South Yorkshire, where Ashgar attacked her before throwing her into the water. Hussain, the father of her child, was also there. The two men were arrested and tried for murder. The pathologist in court revealed that Laura had been stabbed in the top of her head repeatedly as she tried to struggle out of the water. Ashgar was found guilty and sentenced to 17 years in prison, and Hussain was acquitted in June last year. A long time reporting that one then. Would it have been so long if a young Muslim girl was found in a river, having borne a child to another Muslim and wanting to marry her first love? No, because it would never happen. If such a thing occurred, the offending girl would be spirited back to Pakistan, and that would be that. So the circumstances and everything about this crime is not related in any way to honour killings. Are you listening, Mr. Plod? Laura was not a Sikh or Hindu girl with an arranged marriage to try and get out of. That arrangement is between two families, always of the same religion, and does lead to the occasional honour killing by one or both of those families. I am not denigrating the terrible position these young women find themselves in, but it is not similar in any way, shape or form to this case. You can open up organisations to aid South Asian women in this problem, but it will not solve the problem of the Muslim grooming gangs. It is like the elephant in the room. No one wants to admit that it goes on for fear of offending these disgusting people. One reporter openly likens this murder as a first white honour killing and references BBC Panorama's programme. Also referenced heavily are the statistics of honour killings by the police, who do investigate this crime, by the way. The numbers are 2,823 honour crimes that were reported in 2010. Well, here I am again. Call me an Islamophobe, I do not really care. This young girl may well be one of the many deaths that will be shovelled away because the authorities do not want to face the truth on a problem that is getting worse and spreading throughout the United Kingdom. Laura Wilson was a victim, probably one of the many who haven't ended up in a kebab, and her epitaph is honour killing. Well, my friends, there is no honour in this killing or the others. Shame, shame and more shame on our police and authorities for being such cowards. When will they learn that Islam has never and never will respect cowards? And finally, on a lighter note, a Shropshire cat has only 8 lives left after getting itself all in a spin. Not literally, but actually. The pussycat, named as Demi, fell asleep in its owner's washing, only it was in the tumble dryer at the time. The cat tumbled around with the washing for half an hour and was a bit dazed. After a visit to the veterinary surgeon, Demi recovered. The owner has now got rid of the tumble dryer for fear of any more of her other pussycats doing the same. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. News. Police have warned that a festival in Finsbury Park could attract terrorists from the far left. The Kurdish Communist Workers Party, known as PKK, flew the Red Star banner at last year's event. Kurds who organised the event say it would be unwise to ask us to stop people using the PKK flag because even your police won't do it. 5,000 people are expected to attend. Kurdish Communist Workers to hold Red Festival in London Park. 2 men sentenced for standing on a man's head in London. Turks ready to reinvest in Greece. Far right not behind Jewish shootings in Toulouse. Man linked to Al-Qaeda on trial in Germany. Heavy fighting against Al-Qaeda forces in Somalia. Thought for the day, Laura Wilson, A Fine Romance. UK, the 2 men, named as Yufuk Yapichi and Michael Wabara, attacked the man after he refused to allow the girl he was with to get into the car with them. Both men have been sentenced to 7 years in prison. No mention of deportation then. Euronews. Greece for the first time could see some form of help from its disliked neighbour Turkey.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number 1 in nationalist news.
Headlines of the news today, Wednesday the 21st of March. One spokesperson commented, "Can you imagine what Finsbury Park was like 70 years ago compared to what is being allowed now?" 2 men have been sentenced in London for attacking a man by kicking him unconscious, then dragging him through a supermarket and beating him savagely. They then both stood on his head and broke his jaw, after which they then sped off in their high-powered BMW. The incident took place last September when